goals that we are thinking about when we start looking at why there is a need for product design, especially technology specific product design and managing those specific products. I think you're muted, Ramesh.
Sorry. Yeah, that's a fantastic context, Raghu. Isaac, you've been in the product industry all your professional life, right? And have a very, very good insight globally, working for various companies and working in India for such a long time. So, from industry perspective, like, what do you think? I mean, Raghu said the growth. I mean, very broad content in terms of creating products. What all needs to be considered. Now, if you look at it, existing products, right, when you're managing, can you just in a couple of minutes share your view of what is product management when it comes to companies that have products already?
Sure, Ramesh. I'll also answer your first question about a product itself, right? I think if we take a step back, what are we trying to achieve, right? We are trying to conceive something, create something which, by virtue of economy of scale, can reach not one customer, but reach multiple customers, right? I think that's a product, right? I mean, if say I need a house built just for myself and it is a unique house for me, that is not a product, right? But then if an apartment complex is there conceiving something, designing something, thinking, okay, I'll build 1,000 apartments, there will be 1,000 customers who will come, then that becomes a product, right? So the point is you're designing something that is meeting market needs, that could meet multiple customer requirements and achieve the economies of scale of your design itself, right? I think this is at a very core level, whether you talked about, loan application or whatever it is, you can apply it any industry. That is what it is. You're trying to achieve economy of scale, apply the thought and wisdom upfront, right? Now, obviously, it means there are also, when you think about products, there are three major areas you can think in terms of where a product mindset could apply to. One is a completely new product that has not been there at all, right? So take an example of when mobile phones did not exist at all, right? Or maybe when the smartphone came up. So then you're talking about, conceiving something which doesn't exist at all at that point of time. Still, you conceive something and you design and you create it, thinking if you created it, there will be, and there'll be a lot of users and there'll be a lot of customers who will take it up. So then this is kind of one particular way of thinking about creating a completely new product that doesn't exist. Many times, obviously, the examples are very fascinating when we think about different companies that have done that, which didn't exist before. But then this is only a part of the whole equation, right? The second part is, okay, you did not conceive a mobile phone, but still you could enter the space by creating your own product, right? I think that is also a product and a product idea. You didn't have to necessarily come up with the original product idea of what meets all the customers, but that said, you are equipped to create a competitive product in the same space, addressing the same market space, right? So this is again a second thing about, okay, there were first movers in terms of creating mobile phones, but it is not just only one or two companies created mobile phones. There are other people who entered later. They also created products which are unique in features and so on, right? And then a third area, which actually a lot of work really falls in this area, is, okay, it is neither a new product in the industry, nor is it a new product from the company. The third biggest area is about, okay, you already have a product, but what are the incremental innovations that need to be done? What are the competitive things that you need to be done? What are the things you need to think about, segmentation? What are the size of the customer base that you're going into? The third, and this is in my view, is a big part of the area, because there are so many companies building so many products. None of them are many of them are not version 1.0. You need to keep building and enhancements and make the product competitive so that it can scale and continue to apply to a larger segment. So this is again an important area, right? So when we look at it, obviously a startup is probably in the first or the second phase where, okay, you're thinking about a product that never existed you wanted to create, or you want to create a product from ground up. You think you can also address the same market. Maybe it is not brand new invention or innovation, but you think you can address the market in a different way. But I think the third area is probably where a lot of need is also, where products are there in the market. They have their own life cycle of 1, 2, 3, 4 decades, right? And you need to compete in that market. So this is how I see it. So the product management as a role, of course, it is very exciting to be on the first bucket where we are completely inventing something that doesn't exist. But I think there is a lot of excitement. There is a lot of business acumen needed to be part of the third segment where you're dealing with a lot of competition, analysts, customers, and your own organizational capabilities, go to market. So many complexities also apply into the third segment. And in my view, that is probably the biggest segment of employability also in terms of a program like this. When if I have to think about in my mind about the distribution of people who would be employable coming out of a program like this or wherever, right? I think large part of would be in the existing innovations and incremental innovations, and then in different proportion to the other areas. That's how I look at it. Ramesh, you're on mute.
I think that's a fantastic context, Isaac, and also the definition. Now, just going a little bit into we're talking about product design and product management as a definition of product and managing the whole life cycle of the product, from understanding what is required in the market through defining it, designing it, and building it, and then of course managing even post it's getting into the market. So that's broadly product management. Now, what's the convergence of product design and product management? I mean, you can look at design as an attribute of development, or you can look at design as an attribute of product management. Right now, what is the convergence between design and management?
So the way I look at it, the product positioning and the requirements needs to be transitioned into the right things that is getting built. I think we all would have seen some popular cartoons in the past about what is being conceived by the customer, what is conceived by product management, and then what eventually gets built, and what really ends up being the outcome of it. Right? I think there are some popular cartoons around it. But the question is, it would not be useful at all if, you end up with a good requirements and understanding of where your positioning is, what you need to build and what to be successful. But in the end, if it doesn't translate into the right design and the right implementation and the right go-to-market, you cannot be successful. So though we talk about these as, product management, user experience, and then, building the software, and then deployment and operations as, various stages before something is realized, the value is realized at the customer. It is not, things don't operate in silos, and they are not, firm boundaries. Many of our work within an organization is about how do you really make these groups work together so that things flow correctly without any rigidity in terms of handoff, so that we are staying honest to what is the true requirement in the marketplace, right? So in that context, if you think about it, a product management, okay, first is conceiving the requirements, strategy, roadmap, whatever it is. There is also the responsibility to work on the internal side to realize the right design, right? So it may not be the case a product manager has the right usability and user experience skills, but then obviously would be able to need to be in a position to work with those internal organizations to be able to translate the requirements into the right design, right? Because in the end, it's the product manager again taking that back to the market, right? You better have it rightly built and internally to be able to take it back to the market.
No, absolutely. So Raghu, you've been dealing with designers.
I absolutely agree with what Isaac's saying. I think if I have to look at it from an academic perspective, right, there's the idea of product design as a noun, and then the idea of product design as a verb, where you now start looking at product design as a process, right? Versus just the notion of product design where you say, okay, there is this one particular step of doing something, versus this entire process where at every stage there are some design aspects that are involved. Even if you take a very simple and familiar technology product, right? You're not just talking about the user interface. We're talking about algorithm design. We're talking about protocol design. We're talking about architecture design. So there are various aspects to design itself when we are looking at just pure technology products. Now you start bringing in all these other different types of products, then there are various aspects to design itself. So coming up with a very concrete notion of what product design is extremely difficult, and it is evolving, right? So broadly speaking, people, I think, agree upon the notion that it is a process and it is bound to evolve. And you start focusing specifically on a particular type of products, maybe that you're dealing with, and then start fitting in, okay, what aspects of, processes do you need to worry about?
Right.
So, in the whole definition stage, design often is looked at, product design is looked at, like I said, it's not too different from a technology architecture or technical design. So there's a conventional kind of people that are not really into it would assume that it is like there's development, there's design, there's testing, and there's support. Like it looks like it's a function of building the product. but there is a much stronger angle to design in defining the product. So what's that specific convergence of design and management, meaning in terms of the customers and the business of the products and design? What is that link more specifically?
So I think, see, right now, if you translate that into, a lot of our organizations now follow agile development processes, right? I think when we think about it, this has matured quite a bit, maybe 20 plus years now. Scrum and Agile are adopted, and there are things, improvisations done as well. Now, if you translate that, I think it really comes down to, some of the roles in organizations where you are required to translate that requirement clearly into a Scrum team or a team of people. Right. I think that has now become more a formalized expectation of, translating the requirement into what an engineering team or a development team can consume and deliver in terms of eventual software output. So if I look at it, it is no longer, if you look at maybe 15, 20 years ago, we have this MRD document, marketing requirements document, then product requirements document, then you review all of these documents and eventually go and build the software. But then the convergence is really more on the agility side, where there is close collaboration and dialogue between, somebody who's driving the product direction and working with the team that is building the actual software, right? I would say, I think some of our development processes have actually driven the convergence on this end, and also on the other side, when we think about with SaaS, all the deployment and the operation side also, right? I think so now it has all come together in a very converged way from, product management to, operations.
If I may add, maybe I want to add the context and introduce the notion. Again, most of you are familiar with product managers, right? And what their roles are in this context, right? Effectively, I think they are probably going to be drivers of this convergence in future. At least that's what I believe, right? Because if we really think about it, a product manager from the organization's perspective is more to bring the business value, based on the products, in that sense, when we look at the host organization. But if you look at it, he or she, whoever it is the voice of the user, on the other hand. So therein lies the, convergence right there. You bring in the user's perspective, you also look at the business value from the organization's perspective. And then in between lies the whole idea of being aware of the technology stack, what is the amount of effort involved, so more importantly, must be aware of, the resources and the underlying effort involved, etc. Right? So these three aspects, and I believe a product manager's role is going to be even more important, as we move forward. And all three are something that a project, they may not be experts in all three, but I think if we put up like a Venn diagram, right, they'll probably be in that middle of that Venn diagram. If the three parts are there, they'll probably be in that middle part.
Yeah, I think so. That's true. I think it is. It's central. People don't normally assume that it is as important to the business of the product, the design, as it is also to the functioning of the product. I think that's a convergence that often gets missed out. Now, in recent years, I think, Raghu, you did set some context.
Isaac was...
No, I think one comment on that. I think you're absolutely right on the importance of the role. I think the people who are most successful are the ones who think they are the CEO of the product, right? I think because there is a lot of, you can always write down roles and responsibilities and skills, but I think that ownership, right? I mean, you are actually empowered to take charge and do as much as you can do. That is what leads to the success of the individual and also for the product, right? I think many times if you think about a CEO of a product, that is a good way to think about it, or a captain of a team. One might still play a role, right? A captain of a cricket team bowls and bats, but still there is a responsibility about bringing everything together for the success of the team. I think that largely lies with the product manager, right?
True. I think that's an important function. Now, just following up on that, I mean, like in recent years, I think Raghu did allude to that in his opening comments, but just to drill down a little bit more, in recent years, there's more interest. I mean, like we haven't been hearing much of, other than in technology product companies and that too in small groups in the product companies, we wouldn't normally hear of product managers so much. But in recent years, there's been like a slightly more, lot of attention. You hear the term more often, even outside. So what are your thoughts? I mean, what do you think is triggering that interest?
Okay, so yeah, here is my thinking on this, because if I look back at say 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, when you look at the technical careers in India, right? I think many people aspired to become managerial roles, because the prevalent ones were large services companies, and people would, very soon get into managerial roles. But I think I would say maybe 10, 15 years ago, people started aspiring for technical career paths, and the industry was able to support it, right? I think before that, it is not that people were aspiring, they were looking at a career growth, and what was available was, more on the managerial side. But then the industry is able to support it. So what happened when you are able to create more around technical career paths is the ownership of teams in India increases, right? I mean, you are able to now do design, architecture, and you have, the ownership is at the level of, building a component, building a functionality, building at a product, right? You can hand off and get things done. So along with that, what happens, some of the other functions also, we are able to build now a lot of capabilities in India. For example, when you look at user experience, there is a good ecosystem, right? I think we can hire a lot of people who can who can do user experience. You can have documentation, performance engineering, security testing, right? There is a whole bunch of other capabilities also came, right, from in terms of being able to, the industry is able to do it, and at a higher level of ownership. So now if you logically think about it, the next thing that is missing here, which can easily be handed over to India and can be done, is really at a product management level, right? I mean, you have everything else available. You have development all the way from, entry level to the most senior architect level. You have testing, you have user experience, you have, documentation. Then, okay, instead of thinking about handing over something to do, why don't we have people in India being able to figure out what needs to be done, right? And then along with that, I think I would also go back to saying that the agile development processes have also contributed to it, right? Because if you think about it, the product owner role in a Scrum team, right? Typically, you would end up with maybe a product owner for one Scrum team, or a product owner for two Scrum teams, so depending on, nature of the work. When that role also got a little bit more formalized, I think the industry started thinking, why don't we encapsulate this whole unit of work, right? From definition to elaboration to locally working with the rest of the team members, synergies. You need to work closely with the team. Then the unit of work became, okay, we need to get some functionality done, or we need to get some roadmap done. We need to get some new product done. But then all the people involved, it is better they're co-located together, working together, right? Now, when we think about the maturity of the industry in this direction, now, if you say, on an roughly, I would think 5% of roles are product management roles in a large product development organization. Why I say that, if you have two Scrum teams, right, or maybe one Scrum team, two Scrum team, a product owner or product manager is required to achieve, right deliverables. So if you think about, if you look at 100 people group, then you might have 5 managers, right? I think you would have 5 to 10 managers depending on it. Similarly, you might end up with 5 to 10 product managers. So if you think about, if you translate that overall, right, I think from an ecosystem point of view, there is a need for more product managers as more and more organizations want to do more out of India. I would roughly put it as, about at least around 5 to 10% of the population of, product development organization would eventually end up being product managers, very similar to managerial roles, very similar to, senior technical roles. So when I look at all of these 3 pillars, these 3 groups would form up, 10 to 20% of a large organization, right? And probably in equivalent proportion.
Great.
So yeah, I think that's a great observation. So you're looking at startups. So you're looking at students. Sorry, Raghu. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's great. Isaac absolutely, rightly alluded to the whole industry side of it, right? I want to see and probably point out, right, how the government is also actually keen on this. Not only the industry, right? The government is also very keen on this. So if you look at the whole Design in India initiative and manufacture in India, right? Eventually, it's not just about manufacturing. It's also going to be about the whole idea of creating products and solving problems potentially, right? And the design initiative, if you remember the design innovation centers that the government has established, there are almost 92 design innovation centers now across India. So in that sense, they're also trying to encourage it from the grassroots level because it's important, like what Isaac was pointing.
No, I think that's also a very important point. True. I mean, there's a much broader emphasis across the board now. Now, just looking at it a little bit, even from Raghu, you're on the incubators, Triplight Incubators board, and you do engage with startups, you do work with products. Looking at it from a new product standpoint, what is the role of design in new products?
See, this is a hard part, right? Because ultimately, when you look at this, and I want to go back to my class first, when I teach my undergrads, right? First thing, when I give a problem, they always come back with an algorithm and come back and say, "Oh, here's my solution." Right? You forget about all other aspects. They come back and say, "Here's my solution." So, and then I go back and say, "Okay, forget about the actual solution. First, think about the solution and the various alternatives to these solutions and the characteristics that you want associated with these solutions and the trade-offs that you can possibly come up with, right?" And this is purely from an engineering design perspective, right? Now you start abstracting out. This is applicable not just for software, isn't it? It's applicable for any product you're creating. And with our own ecosystem at CIE, most of them tend to be software products. Our specialization has been deep technology per se, application of various aspects of our own research labs, right? So we have seen how many times, due to various reasons, the solution, is not actually what they, want, primarily because they're not spending as much time on the initial aspects of trying to come up with this whole design life cycle, if I can say so, right? Rather than, it is not just about customers. Yes, customers are important, absolutely important. But then because they don't spend enough time, you end up doing a lot of rework and an effort, which can fundamentally be reduced if at all we start looking at a more design thinking or a systems thinking by type of development, right? Rather than just purely looking at the traditional way of saying, okay, let's look at a problem, let's build a solution.
True. So true. Now, looking at the in terms of you did touch upon the government. I mean, both of you touched upon the product industry now moving up the value chain in the country, and of course startups and the push for new products. Now you look at services companies. Isaac, you did touch upon it briefly when you started in your early comments. What does it mean for companies working on projects? There's a different way of thinking. You could look at this differently, even for work typically not a product. What is the angle when it comes to looking at services industry and projects also on the lines of product? Isaac, you may have some first-person perspective on that.
I think the way to also look at a product is, I think it is more about repeatable components, right? I think which drives economy of scale, right? I think so when you think about in that aspect, it may be within a large services organization, then you think about internally, what are the pieces of technology or software that you could create, right? I mean, whether it could be your, not even software, right? It could be best practices is really kind of a product, which once you are able to create certain best practices that scales internally well, right? So those are, I would look at such capabilities, either through technology or non-technology, that would help with scaling and applying the same thing across different customers, right? As probably the value that is available there. But I'm not, I don't have too much insights into what exactly the services companies do, but at some point of time we're talking about innovation-led services and things like that, right? Which is a little bit more of IP driven services. I think these are kind of ways of saying, what does that mean to say IP-driven services? Meaning, you're able to productize some capabilities based on visibility into working with different customers, maybe in the same industry across different industries, that we are able to do create some IP or productize some technology, meaning create something that can apply across the board. Then we are able to say, okay, we are going to market with some IP-led services. That is how far I'm able to relate to it from an internal point of view.
So Raghu, you have worked with companies around their kind of programs. where they got their mid-level, senior level people for some workshops, and like also, and you're running the software engineering program also now. What is your reading as you work with the companies that are not traditionally product companies? What is your reading of their perspective on thinking of their work as products, and of course the relevance of product management and design in what they do?
So one of the things, at least with the people whom we generally who are registered for these programs, of course, they are fundamentally looking to move into product companies. So if I can say so, right? A lot of these are doing tasks which at a certain level, beyond a certain point, are just the same thing again and again, right? So there aren't those challenges that some of these people are seeking. So as a result, they're looking to move into product companies. And those who are already in the product companies are fundamentally looking to upskill with respect to technology, right? So as a result, technology is a moving target. It's always going to be a moving target. So those who are, let's say, managers are now coming back and saying, okay, I want to learn some technologies because I want to be able to understand if one of my developer tells me that, okay, it's going to take 10 hours to develop this small snippet, right? And now he or she is not aware of how much time it probably is going to take. So they need to understand that effort. So there's kind of an, interplay where managers are trying to learn technology, right? And people who have never been into technology are trying to get into technology. So the key word, of course, underneath it, at least from the programs that we run, has always been that binding factor, which is technology.
No, absolutely. I think technology and innovation, that convergence does provide a lot of opportunity. There's a comment also from Nagarjuna that there are companies looking at frameworks, building frameworks, which is a very common thing most services companies are looking at now. Look at, even as you build projects, build framework that makes it easier to on the next set of projects. And innovation, like Isaac mentioned, I think is an important aspect where the whole product thinking and the central role that design plays comes into the picture. Now, if you just, while on that topic still, in terms of roles, Raghu, that you also touched upon now, what are the different, if you look at product managers, if somebody that is wanting to become a product manager or design-aware product manager, product designers have a fairly well-defined role. Now we're looking at this convergence of technology, design, and product management. That is the role which is a little bit more on product manager or a product leader role. So design-aware product managers, like if you could, still both of you, starting with Raghu, if you could share what kind of roles would companies have typically for that kind of a design-aware product management person, so to speak?
No, as I said, to start with, I think this is something that I alluded to at the start, and I'm sure Isaac probably is the right person for this. I think most of the future products are probably going to be digital products, no matter what, right? And anything physical is just going to be a container for these digital products. So the word digital is probably going to be used in any designation that probably people might end up with in future. This is at least the way I'm imagining things. I might be wrong, I might be right, but Isaac can probably point out. So digital designers, whether it is virtual interaction designers, for example, that's another, because I think I believe every product at some level, especially if it's software, is probably going to move into augmented reality, right? Because they want to engage with the users. So interaction designers are some jobs that are probably going to increase, right? If you take technology, for example, from a evolving 5G technology perspective, right? With respect to managing the various products that are going to change just because the technology has evolved. So I don't know if I have the right set of roles or designations to answer your questions, but broadly, I'm seeing the convergence of these areas definitely is going to get new designations in place.
No, I think that is true. And the whole push towards innovation and such is also accelerating some of these roles. Isaac, your view. I know product industry has always had this, but in the product industry also, these are evolving a little bit. And in broader software industry, your views, Isaac?
So I think I would say it has become quite clear now. So I think, Raghu alluded to the interaction designers. That is a very clearly established role. There are people in the market, and this is internally within the organization very clearly established, right? Interaction designer. And of course, the product manager works closely with the interaction designer in terms of realizing the right product design meeting the market. So when we look at it, I also think, right, when we talk about product manager in a broad sense, but it is really a little bit of a complex role, right? Because at one end, we cannot really think lightly of the business acumen the role needs. There is one part of it, there is the technology side of it, working with interaction designers, technical people, translating that into technology to solve a business problem. But then if one were thinking along those lines, it becomes more of an analyst role, right? Elaboration, working internally. It is still not, really a product design in the context of solving what the market needs. It is really, okay, somebody figured out what the market needs, and you are really trying to playing a role of translating that into a design and implementation stage. So I would really, for a good product, one think about, achieving a good business acumen. A part of the education, however, it is about, business education, understanding, product positioning, what is the go-to market, why are we doing it, answer those questions about why we are doing something, right? Then it becomes, translating that becomes, very natural in terms of you understand clearly what needs to be done. Then you're able to do justice to your competitive positioning, your customers and the market in terms of translating the requirement. Not only that, along the way, you may need to iterate throughout the cycle, right? So my point here is, this role is a little bit quite broad in terms of how it plays out in an organization. It also should not be seen as a very only in the context of product design. It has to be thought, as much importance has to be given in terms of the market side of the things. What are we doing? Why are we doing? What is the positioning of it? Then translated, of course, one would work with senior technical architects, engineering management, would work with the interaction designers, and then doing all of those things that are internal and important, right? So,
no, absolutely. I think the other facet is like, it's not necessarily a new role, right? It's a new function in existing roles as well. Like whether you're an architect or a dev manager or like any of the mid-level leadership roles. So what is that angle? I mean, like from an existing dev manager or an architect or a principal engineer standpoint, what is the angle of product design and management that's coming in as this whole industry evolves?
So what I see is, there are different ways people are now able to, aspire or get into a product management role. So one is, of course, internal, where we see employees who have done maybe many years as a developer, right? Might have grown into a senior architect level, but they are not just hardcore technical. They have a good sense of, what should the product do? I mean, as people grow, they have an appetite for it. Then they might say, okay, now I want to transition into, driving the product strategy, product management. So we see people moving in that direction. We also see in some cases for people from a testing background, right? If you look at it compared to somebody who comes in a development track, somebody comes to the testing track actually have acquired much better domain expertise, right? Because they're largely dealing with the overall functionality versus maybe typically a developer dealing with a part of the technology, part of a product that they are working on. So we also find, good people in the industry who have worked on from a testing thing, but over time, have a broader business acumen, other skills in terms of communication and everything, aspiring and taking on a product management role, right? So I think these are two streams we have seen from an internal to an organization. The other example where we see is that, people in the industry, right, maybe have been in a developer role or with some technology background, right, in the industry for a few years, then getting an MBA degree, right, somewhere, getting a clear business degree as a way of transitioning into a product management role, right? So this is another segment of people we have hired. I think the industry hiring a lot of them who have come with some level of good technology background, maybe a good technology undergraduate education, but then with a more formal business and other product management education are able to really kind of leapfrog into a more senior responsible role, and also able to do well because their education also supports them well. So I see this, also, right, even for internal people, there are good programs out there. People can do part-time or a few weeks and so on. So I think in the end also, I think there is an investment needed from an individual point of view, because it is not something you do an undergrad and directly become a product manager, right? I think it becomes a little bit more investment, maybe more specialization like the program is offering, or if you are coming through the ranks within an organization, investment in, taking up some other certifications or other education, or maybe doing a part-time MBA, or all these things would help. Particularly, I say this because there is a business side of it, which should not be, which should not be missed. Because without which, where does the product management role grow over a period of time? Okay, you become a product manager. Then you would want to, become a product portfolio manager, or a product manager for heading for a business unit, or you want to head product management for the whole company, right? I think this is how the career would go. But then in that context, I think a good mix of technology and business education together would serve them well for a very long term.
I think that's all very, very valid points, Isaac. Raghu, building on that, now, again, just to reiterate, we've been looking at this as a serious gap in the whole environment today in terms of its education or post, concurrent, executive education standpoint for working professionals. That convergence of technology, design, and management is something that is missing. So now many of the roles in our industry are technology roles. Where it's an architect or a dev manager, or they're more technology than product. So what is that angle? Specifically looking at it just from their standpoint, how does design and management enrich their role, even if their role is a pure product function, dev function?
So I'm not sure if I understand the question, but from a broader perspective, as I said, right at the start when I described that, yes, I absolutely agree that product management, the third part where there are existing products and how these products evolve, right? A manager's role is to look into the whole business side of things and start working with these products that evolve. On the other hand, if you look at it from a perspective of product management, it's also you evolve in your journey as an entrepreneur, right? So there is existing product and then creating a new product. And these are two sides to it. So, and we are trying to address both sides by saying, okay, as part of this program, yes, if you're an existing product manager or you want to become a product manager, then you start looking at learning, the users, or what do your customers want, trying to understand the customers, trying to understand the end users. So that's where the design aspect will focus on. So you have a certain set of electives that you probably end up taking. And then within those, you say, okay, what type of products am I focusing? Given we are fundamentally a IT institute, so as a result, our products invariably are IT products. But that's just a foundation, right? And then you start expanding beyond those set of products. And so I see ourselves bridging both, right? If we yes, I agree that the MBA and product management is definitely something that people do to get into a certain role. What we are trying to see is, can we come up with a program where we try to balance out all these aspects: technology aspect, design aspect, and also management aspect. And we may not be an expert in each, but the person who's graduating out of this will hopefully understand each of these.
No, I think that's a good point. So Isaac, you are familiar. You're doing your PhD, almost completing it now in a business school. And you've been a technologist and kind of a product engineering person all your working life. Now, how is that? If you look at it from a pure product management standpoint, MBA, is MBA sufficient for product management? What are the facets that are not complete? Because typically, if you look at product managers, they hire an MBA person. And I personally believe MBA is a negative skill for a startup, especially as a startup. MBAs are professional managers. And the product management role is a little bit more creative function, but still MBA does teach the business fundamentals and market fundamentals. So can you touch upon what does MBA do for product management? What are the gaps that we are hoping to address through this PDM program?
Right. See, so I look at it as, education is good, right? I think in that way, I don't see anything at all, contradictory in that way in terms of that could be negative by one doing an MBA or any program where knowledge comes in, right? Because a big part of a product is meeting customer needs. I mean, it needs to hold itself well in the market and then position right competitively, all of this. So MBA gives a structure to it rather than one learning by oneself and whatnot. Right? That is why it is an accelerated way of learning, whether it is MBA or one buys some books and reads or take some courses or part-time. I think it's more about you need to have that business knowledge. But then when you look at it, the other side of it, we are talking about a technology industry. Now, if you think about, are you in the gaming industry? Then you need to understand the domain side of that equation, right? Are you in the life sciences industry? Then you need to understand the domain side of it, right? I think so. Now it depends on, depending on the nature of which domain you are trying to become a product manager, right? You might be building products for the technology products for the music industry. It could be anything and everything, or you could go ahead and do enterprise software on some HR related. But then you need to understand that domain deeply, right? That doesn't come from your MBA. You get a good sense of how business, I mean, how do you really do things from a business point of view, right? But then this investment in the domain is very important. And then once you invest in that domain, okay, what else can you do with technology in that domain? And then marry that with your business acumen so that you can be successful in realizing something in the market, right? So I would say, okay, business education is very good, but because it is about business, this is all about, making, profits and higher revenue. So that is important and valuable. But by itself, it is a good foundation. But then the second important thing I would say is the domain. And the third is, within that, how the domain and the technology bring together more value in the business context.
I think so that the value, I mean, absolutely right. I mean, the foundation is no two ways around it. Understanding of markets, understanding of business, the revenue and profit models and customer and all that is definitely a foundation that MBA gives. But as a product manager, there's also a creative connecting of the dots that happens, right? You have to look at, there are many things. There's market, there's competition, there are the emerging trends, there are technology, and then connecting some of the relevant dots to come say, okay, if we do this in the next 6 months, we can go after this opportunity, right? And that's the fundamental role of a good product manager. Now, in that sense, Raghu, how do we weave that into this program, that facet of creative thinking?
So maybe it might be better explained if we actually look at the way the curriculum is structured, right? The way we are now saying that in a 2-year program, you're not looking at 1 year where you start right off the bat, you start looking at, okay, your foundational design courses, your advanced design courses that and you're now going to not just learn theory, because most of the courses that we are imagining are going to be hands-on, right? So in other sense, you are going to be working with a product that you already are working on, or a product that you want to create if you are looking at an entrepreneurial / startup journey, right? So it's embedded in the way the course is structured, and the year-long project kind of accentuates this, where you're starting from your ideation all the way till hopefully you get a prototype out by the end of the program. So that to me is a major plus, I believe, and I hope we will know, obviously, a couple of years down the line when the first batch graduates.
Sure. True. Now, while we are on that topic, I would like to just, Raghu, have you explain the structure of the program also. So before we get into that, Isaac, if you could just talk a little bit, quickly touch upon the user centricity aspect of product development and product design, right? I mean, that's something, especially given we are often working either the clients or the principals, the customer facing part of the organizations or elsewhere in the world. And the groups in India often, while we're very good technically, we're very good in building products, designing, architecting, and the whole life cycle. The customer part of it is a little weak for us because markets are elsewhere and we don't get a chance to see much of that. That customer centricity, how important is it for good product development, even if it's a dev role or any of the roles? And how do we groom or build that?
See, I think in my view, it is not as hard as generally it is thought to be, right? I think we typically consider that as a big thing that is pulling us back, particularly in early years, as okay, this is how far we can do in India because you're not closer to the customer, right? I think this is one of the typical arguments in terms of how much we can achieve from India. But I think from what we have seen, that is not always the case. There are few ways to overcome it. In many cases, we have multiple product managers working together, right? In terms of, it is not like one person alone for a large product or a large area. There are multiple product managers. Then they are kind of in parallel divvy up their responsibilities, right? I think largely we are talking about now, we are not talking about as much of physical customer visits, right? I think that is not happening for a while. It is more about if there are some time zone restriction, can some other person take the lead, right? I think this is kind of what we are talking about. It is not about capability or something. So as long as we have a partnership within a group itself in terms of people, complement each other and what they're able to focus on. Because when being in India, it also gives us strength in terms of working closely with the team, closely with the interaction designers and so on, though you might be a little bit away from customers. But that too, right? Many times what we see is people are able to manage their time. It is more about, time management. Sometimes you need to overlap. Sometimes you can rely on somebody else to help you through. That is what we have seen. And we have also seen cases where whole product and product management entirely is run out of India, where of course the larger markets are Europe and US, North America and EMEA. But still, it is not too hard to do, because when you have to understand a lot of things about competition or analyst information or various things, it is not that you are always in calls, right? A lot of information is available, right? I mean, in terms of reports or other research and other internal information. Many times you have to talk to internal stakeholders many times, right? I think it is not always you're talking to customers. So some of the shortcomings, I think people who are very aspirational, we have seen, are able to overcome it. I think it comes down to, whether you want to do it. And I think organizations are at this point of time prepared to give those opportunities quite a bit.
I think that's true. I think that's a good point. I think the opportunities are definitely increasing. The awareness of customers also is increasing these days. Now, just to conclude, I mean, we have a few more minutes left. So I'm just going to put up a slide on the program. Raghu, if you can just quickly, there's some questions coming on the structure of the program as well on the chat window. Maybe if you can just quickly touch upon the program, let me just present the
maybe 30
one slide. And sure. If you can just quickly give an overview of the program, Raghu.
Yeah, maybe 30 seconds, and we can probably address some questions if we can. So broadly, the program is 2 years on a full-time basis, right? You can do it on a part-time basis, but there won't be separate classes per se for part-time students versus full-time. You will also be, along with full-time students. Only thing is your courses that you take, the number of courses that you take probably is going to be a little slow. So which means you will probably take a longer duration for it. The course is structured, as I said, into 3 equal parts. Hopefully, technology will have 1/3 of the credits. The business side will have 1/3 of the credits, and then the design side will have 1/3 of the credits. And the program is targeted for 3 separate categories of people, right? We're looking at, when we say fresh grads, we are typically looking at grads who have some development experience, right? Whether it's at an internship or whether it's in working in some company, you have done some product development, because it's going to be a deep dive in terms of the technology itself. So if you're not somebody who has touched upon any technology, then you might need to do some bridge courses. So that we'll come back to it later in a separate, offline basis. But so that's one type. Then the second is those who want to be entrepreneurs in their startup journey. They want to establish a startup. That's the second. Third is those who are currently in the industry, who are, aspiring product managers, right? Those who are existing people in the industry with a lot of experience who want to get back to customer facing environments, who want to understand customers, who want to understand the design side of things. That's the third category, which we put under industry sponsored or self-sponsored in terms of how you can get admitted. So broadly, these are the 3 categories of people that we are looking at. If there are any specific questions, I'll be very happy to answer. Of course, the course will be taught by academics as well as industry people together. So it's going to be very, very hands-on, and it's going to be a very limited set in terms of the number of admissions we take. So we are probably going to limit ourselves to about 25 to 30 students at best, right? That's the max number that we are looking at. So it doesn't mean that we will actually have 25 to 30. We may restrict ourselves to lower, because every project that either you bring in or we propose, it's going to be a mix, right? It's never going to be where we tell you what are all the projects. So if you have an idea, you bring it in, and you will have a corresponding set of mentors, because the stage at which you are will be different, right? In terms of if you already have an idea versus you have no idea, and then you're still curating an idea. So depending what stage you are, your whole life cycle in terms of how you're going to deal with this and try to correlate with the set of courses are going to be different. So that way we want to limit the number of admissions as much as possible.
I think there's another question related to this. From a startup standpoint, the stage of startup. So I think a startup can be viewed as a company. If it's in later stages, they would fit the bill of a large company, self-sponsored or company-sponsored, if it's anybody in the startup. And early stage startup is the founder. So Raghu, if you can touch upon that, what stage of the startup is ideal for them to join the program?
So as I said, there are two categories, right? So typically we're looking at, early stage startups to start with. And if you're an established startup, then, you would probably go into a different category. So it's not something that we have basically said, oh, this is the only type of startup we're going to look at. But as I alluded to earlier, it depends on the project that you want to try and do, right? And your mentorship will change based on that. And Ramesh, you will probably be, the right person given the CIE expertise that you bring in. So maybe even talk a little bit about CIE if you can, and how that is going to tie into this.
Sure, Raghu. So CIE is the incubator at Tripati, which is one of the older incubators in the country. It's about 13 years old now, and probably one of the largest university incubators as well. And the reason even T-Hub is on our campus. So there are a lot of startups, and we do a lot of emphasis in terms of the activities in the incubator. A lot of focus is on seeding new startups. We are not just an early stage incubator. We are a pre-seed. I mean, when somebody comes with an idea, the startup doesn't even exist yet. So we kind of seed the startup. So there are a lot of programs that we do, especially startups coming either out of research, which unfortunately doesn't happen as often as we would like, or startups with deep technology where our research could help. So that's a big part of what we do at Incubator. So somebody coming to the program with thinking of a startup but doesn't have a firm idea yet would also be attached to the Incubator as they go through the program. They could be based in the incubator if they've already quit their jobs, or as they're curating the idea, they could work with the incubator. And once they decide to start, they can anyway be based out of the incubator. So the incubator is kind of a very joined at the hip type entity for the program. The incubator is going to be very closely involved. For later stage startups, of course, I mean, sometimes what we've realized, especially first-time founders coming from a tech background, don't have a perspective of the business of products and the bigger aspects outside of technology for the products. So we see that even for them, a formal grounding might help. Like even if they have the startup in place, maybe they have a few customers. Like Isaac very rightly said, education can never hurt. So to that extent, it may help them a little bit. Not that it's definitely necessarily required for them to succeed, but may help them get a slightly more formal understanding of the whole space of products and the business of products. I think that's the quick thing on the startups. We are just on the 11 o'clock mark. One last question. Raghu, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you just wanted to mention, I know this is a carrot that I'm trying to dangle, but still. So in order for us to encourage this entrepreneurship journey and people, right, obviously, we are offering monthly stipends, right? So hopefully that should help them also establish, and get back into this academic mode.
If they're doing full-time, yes. That's especially for working professional, that's a consideration that they won't be getting the salary. Yes, that's a good point. So if they're moving in full-time mode, it does help. And the part-time mode, there are questions on part-time. So if you can just touch upon the class schedule for part-time, Raghu, how would they manage if they're doing it along with the job?
So typically what happens is, this program, because it is the first time that we are looking at classes that will probably mostly be held in the late afternoon sessions, right? But as I said, courses will not be separate for part-time students. It will be where the regular and the part-time students attend at the same time. But the flexibility exists because most of these courses that we are offering will be in the late afternoon sessions, maybe 3:30 or so or later. And to the extent possible, especially because some of the courses might be taught by industry people also, So they are held couple of times a week, right? Depending on the number of credits, it's either once a week or twice a week, which means more likely than not, one of the classes might be held on a Saturday. And so the scheduling is not out yet, but that's the plan.
Yeah, I think the preference for Saturdays is one thing that will help. So they may need to come once or twice during the week, but most of the activity may be over on the Saturdays or weekends. The other question is on the deep tech and medtech. Like Raghu already said, we are an IT institute, so we are focused on computing and electronics primarily. So to that extent, there will be tech. Not that, like Raghu rightly said sometime back, it's not that tech is essential for good products. Products can be anywhere, tech or no tech. Just that our standing is tech. So there's a soft preference for tech, but not a very hard preference. But we do expect the participants to take a few technology courses. So to the extent we might expect a background, at least a working background, even if not an education background in tech, but not necessarily deep tech or med tech. Placements, the placement is not the focus for this program. But that said, I mean, any program of ours will be, placement office will be part of the process. For those coming full-time, I mean, placement is an option, but that's not our focus here. The focus here is more around building good products. So startups and working professionals sponsored by companies is our bigger focus. But if there are fresh grads coming in, I mean, they will be given placement assistance as well. Does it require coding skills? Raghu, I'm assuming no, right? They need to build something. To that extent, the background is required, but not otherwise, right, Raghu?
Yeah. Not necessarily where you're an expert, but you are expected to know as you go, right? So it's not that I will never code type of thing will work.
So there are a few more questions coming up on the program. So Isaac, I know you had a busy day and we pulled you out of your busy day. So if you want to just go back, then Raghu can maybe continue answering some more questions.
For a few more.
So Isaac, any last comments you want to share before you sign off?
Sure, Ramesh. I think definitely appreciate being part of this panel. It was a good discussion. But I would also say it is a very important initiative, right? I think from the industry side, understanding the requirements, I would say this particular role is growing. Of course, it is not the biggest part of a technology organization, development, testing, and so on. But in terms of the growth of this role is disproportionate to the growth of the industry. It is growing much more rapidly, filling up historical lesser amount of proportion of product management in the industry. Now it is all the gaps are getting filled up with more rapid requirements for larger population of product management, which was not filled in the past. So I think I really feel this is a very, very timely intervention in terms of offering a program like this. And I saw some questions about what would be a difference between an MBA versus this. I think the part here is MBA, obviously, like I said, gives good business understanding, very important. But here tying that into the technology side because of the deep technology orientation of the institute itself, and also from the domain side and translating this into technology products. I think this is really the need from an industry point of view, people who can come out and do this well, right? So congratulations and wishing you all the very best.
Thanks, Edward. Thanks so much. So if you're most welcome to stay, but if you have other things to take care of, please feel free to sign off. We'll continue answering some of those questions.
No, I'll drop off. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thanks, Isaac. Thank you so much. So Raghu, there's a question on deep tech courses, if it will help relating to the startup. So I think we have the elective structure, right? If you can touch up on that, Raghu. Raghu? Usha?
I think Raghu sir lost his connection. Maybe.
Yes, sir. Raghu.
Okay. Raghu will sign off. We'll sign back in. In the meantime, let me just take that question. So we do have electives in the program structure. Very open. You can take any elective. So there are at least few technology courses that every participant could take. So to that extent, like if somebody is doing something in computer vision, for instance, they're most welcome to take the computer vision. All the courses available would be that we offer in a semester. It's about 100 courses each semester, around 200 in the between the two semesters, would be available for this program for participants to take as electives. So to that extent, the answer to that question is yes. You can take specific deep tech course, Of course, subject to the prerequisites that the course might have. If that course has a prerequisite, then the prerequisite is supposed to be met. Other than that, yes, you could take any course. And you're also, I mean, you can also overload. You can take more than required also. Just that it won't count towards a program credits, but you can take more than required courses as well. Yeah, Raghu, sorry, we lost you there briefly. So I just answered the question on the electives.
Yeah, just had a power cut, sorry.
Yeah, it suddenly frozen. So the next question, if you could help, I completed my graduation in the year 2016, working as solar design engineer. Can I join this program?
I'm assuming they have. So I'm assuming they have some mechanical background, if I'm not wrong. So typically, which means they are already at an advantage because they've learned. Is right. The one of the things that potentially might happen is because we are an IT institute, a lot of what we do might be tied to some of the research labs, right? So as a result, if we are able to identify a project, right, that is the only constraint at this point. Otherwise, I don't see the background as a constraint. We just need to come back and identify some projects which are relevant and which are of interest to people, right? And that's hopefully going to be mutual rather than just unidirectional.
True. And I mean, solar, there is role for technology everywhere. Even if somebody is a mechanical engineer, I'm sure there'll be some sensor technology and other things possible as well. So yes, so there would be a relevance. Another question on the pitch deck. And investor deck is just absolutely perfectly okay to include the investor deck. The idea is to introduce the product. Why are you doing it? What is the opportunity? What is the need? What is the solution? And such. So in water form, it can be presented. It's absolutely okay. And definitely an investor pitch deck is also okay. So if any further questions in us, you can simply type it in the chat window. Or else most welcome to reach us. I mean, you have the bearings. Usha is the program coordinator for the program, so she can help route the questions to Raghu or anyone else of us that could answer. So please feel free to get back later also with any query. You can just drop a line to Usha or to any of us. So Raghu, before we conclude, any last comments, Raghu?
No, see, one of the things, my only comment is I think we at IIIT have a very unique perspective on this, right? And given, because we have historically at least encouraged entrepreneurship, right? You talked about CIE, and of course, probably what would help is the whole idea that we have product labs, we have technology centers for excellence, right? And we have labs which are working with products from a usability perspective. So I would like to believe we have a bit of an edge in terms of our starting point. And as a result, I'm hoping that our program and as per, and I don't know if you mentioned about METI and trying to make this a program where it can be spread across to the rest of the countries. And we are the first in terms of getting this done, which means people who register, I believe, would really significantly gain because we're going to put a lot more effort when we get started versus when it's in a steady state.
True. That is there. I mean, yeah. So MIT, Ministry of IT of India has asked for this program as a replicable template. So after 2 or 3 years, when we get this running and the first 2 batches are done, they're looking at this as a template that any university in the country could adopt. So that's the other angle to this program. It is not just what we are doing. We are doing it on behalf of the government of India as a replicable template that any university can adopt. So that's another interesting aspect of this program. The translation lab, Raghu, yes, bang on. Whether it is the Applied AI Center or the product labs or the social technology for social center, all of them are looking at building products and solutions for different sectors. And those all are also going to be part of the program to help as required. I think is a very good point. So with that, I think, thank you so much. And thanks to Isaac also for having joined, and all the participants. Wish you the very best. I'm sure all of you are either startups or interested in products. So we'd love to have you in the program. And should you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us, myself, Raghu, and of course, Usha. Thank you and all have a great day. Thanks, Raghu. Thanks, Usha.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
everyone. Thanks, everyone. Good luck.